Hi, I'm Lydia.
And I'm Helena, and we both work at the MS Trust. Just a little disclaimer, we're recording this over the phone because of coronavirus and social distancing. So apologies if it sounds a little bit iffy at any stage. Please bear with us.
We'd like to welcome you to our podcast series, It's All in Your Head, which focuses on the topic of mental health and MS. Now, why this topic? Well, here at the MS Trust, we receive thousands of questions on the topic of mood, depression, anxiety, and a bunch of other things that belong under the mental health umbrella. In MS, we are getting quite good at treating the physical symptoms we may have, such as spasticity, pain, problems with our vision or bladder, yet we are not as good at making sure our mind gets the same care.
But through this podcast, we want to change that. We want to normalise the conversation around mental health and get people talking.
Through lockdown and beyond, we've been creating this series with expert guests, personal stories and practical tips to help you take care of your mental health and well-being.
And in today's episode, we got two brilliant guests for you, both with very different stories to tell. First up, we'll be chatting to Sara Coffey, a dramatherapist who explains more about dramatherapy as an approach to dealing with mental health problems. Sarah's worked with people with MS in the past, so shares some brilliant insights into how this kind of therapy can help and dispel some common myths around it.
Spoiler alert, it isn't a therapy for actors and you don't have to go anywhere near the stage.
Oh, I thought I was going to be able to get my Hamlet on.
Unfortunately not. Right, so let's welcome Sara to the podcast. Sara graduated from the University of Roehampton with an MA in drama therapy in 2018. She has a wealth of experience working with a wide range of groups, including children and young people, adults with dementia, palliative care patients, people with life-limiting and long-term health conditions, as well as their carers and families. Through her work at an adult hospice, she has developed a particular interest in how drama therapy can support those with chronic health conditions such as MS. Sara believes that mental health is a vital aspect of living with these conditions, and using a creative approach like drama therapy, which works with both the mind and the body, can really enhance quality of life. So, hi Sara, welcome again, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi Lydia, thanks so much for having me.
And I'm going to start by asking a bit of a general question, but it would be great if you could explain to our listeners what drama therapy is and what exactly a drama therapist does.
Of course, a great starting point, because yes, it's often an unfamiliar term to many. So listeners might have heard of other creative arts therapies, possibly, such as art or music therapy. And drama therapy is quite similar in that it is a form of psychological therapy, which draws on the art form of theatre and drama. So within the kind of therapeutic relationship, people are using drama and theatre to explore difficult life experiences, problems and fears they might be having, and promoting healing and change. So the thing that makes drama therapy quite sort of specific is that we use an indirect approach. So what I mean by that is we might use a story or a kind of dramatic metaphor in some way. And that means that when people are kind of exploring their problems, they're not necessarily always coming at it head on and sort of talking, as you might kind of think of therapy in a more traditional sense, sitting with the therapist and talking, although we do speak as well. But it means that they are able to use something like a story or something that's creative from which to kind of explore what might be going on for them. So it might be that a character is able to kind of they're through a character they're playing, they might be able to voice something that then later they're able to reflect and think, oh gosh, that really signifies something for me in my life. So we're kind of constantly using the dramatic medium to find ways of people exploring things that can often be quite painful to do or too difficult to do head on, or we might even not have the words or the language. So drama therapy does, as you said in the beginning, it places kind of equal importance on the body and the mind. So we're kind of thinking about both aspects. And it is probably really important to say for anybody listening that although the word drama is in the title, there is no need at all to have any drama experience or theatre experience. It's not, as I've had many a time, is that therapy for actors? Which is a valid question to ask. And there are probably plenty of actors who I'm sure, like the rest of us, would appreciate some therapy. But it's very much not about performing or being made to do anything on the spot. The word drama is simply sort of indicating that it's an active form of therapy, and it uses all kinds of creative techniques, theatre, drama games, really to support the people that we're working with as a drama therapist. So that kind of gives you hopefully a bit of an overview of drama therapy. And then being a drama therapist, what do we do? So we work with both groups and individuals. So it can be offered as a one-to-one form of therapy, or you might be in a group. Drama therapists work in a huge array of different settings and with different clients. So it might be schools, it might be care homes, prisons, the NHS. So you'll sort of find us, across the board, really. It's a very person-centered and kind of client-led form of therapy. So that means that it's not very kind of prescriptive. There's no kind of set way that we all work with somebody. And the therapy is very based on what the client needs and finds most helpful and supportive. So drama therapists are a wide range of skills. We kind of have theatre training that we draw on, and as well as understanding of psychological theory. And we use many, many different creative methods and techniques. So that might be stories or myths, as I've already mentioned. It might be theatre and drama games, role play, character work, masks, puppets. So you name it, anything that kind of feels like it comes under the drama theatre category. There's probably drama therapists out there who are using those techniques, because it's a really, really broad area of work, and every drama therapist is working in a slightly different way.
And that brings us on to how you got into this field, because it might be not necessarily a traditional job title or traditional route to go down. So how did you find yourself? How did you find yourself as working as a drama therapist?
Definitely. It's not something I really had heard of at all until I was finishing university. So I had studied drama at university and was kind of looking around for what to do next, and sort of came across this title and thought, oh, that looks very interesting. But there are not many trainings actually in the UK to be a drama therapist. So it's only sort of 4 or 5 places that you can go and do it. And there is very much, as with all therapy trainings, a kind of emphasis on having life experience and, being quite robust in your own sort of mental health, and being really quite prepared to go on a journey with discovering oneself, which is obviously quite important working as a therapist. So at the age of 21, I at first was like, not quite sure I'm ready for that, but it definitely feels like something I'd be interested in, in a few years. So I went away and worked in drama and education for about a decade, and then went back to do the training sort of in my late 20s, early 30s. And in terms of the actual work that I've then done and gone on to be particularly interested in, which is this field of working alongside kind of life-limiting illness, terminal illness, end of life, palliative care, that's actually a very personal journey, because my dad actually died when I was 15. And obviously that was a huge loss in my life, and I've had plenty of therapy sessions exploring that as well, which has been really important. But I sort of took away from that experience the positives of having support from a hospice at the time, and the care that they gave him, the kind of ending that he was able to have because of that support, what we as a family experienced. And so his death, although obviously very tragic and upsetting, was very peaceful, and I have memories of it being a very kind of peaceful thing. Kind of from that point, really, I've always felt drawn to the kind of hospice ethos of holistic care, and the idea of working with people at what is just such a crucial kind of time in their life. And so through my training, I was able to, and then once I was qualified, I was actually able to work as a drama therapist in an adult hospice. So at this point, I might say actually that quite a lot of listeners and people I speak to often have quite a strong association with the word hospice, and what that means. And so for some, it very much does kind of, connote, oh, that's where you go right at the end of life. That's to do with death and dying, and that's not very much to do with my experience at the moment, and it can even possibly worry people, or there might be fear associated with that, which I totally understand. I think we've still got quite a way to go as a society, really, to destigmatize that kind of notion of hospice as really being the final port of call. And I was pleasantly surprised. As I said, I'd had a positive experience, but actually the kind of hospice experience that I had was that it's a huge and wide range of services that are available to people, and it very much is supporting people at all stages of their illness journey. So obviously there are patients there who you might associate with hospice care, so receiving palliative treatment, so it might be cancer patients, but also lots and lots of the patients that I saw were people with long-term conditions, so things like motor neuron disease, Parkinson's, and indeed MS. And so I found that really eye-opening and really exciting, actually, that it was kind of reframing hospice care, rethinking about the services that are provided. So it's really kind of, how can the hospice support you alongside living with your illness? And I mean, the founder of the hospice movement is very famously quoted as saying this idea of living whilst dying. So even once you are towards the end, the focus is on life. The focus is on how we support people and how we help them live as they want to live, as well as they're able to, alongside the illness that they might have. So the hospice I worked for, I actually was part of a kind of day service. So rather than the kind of bedded ward, which, there was an inpatient kind of unit where people were much more kind of ill, they also have lots and lots of day services. So patients would come in to meet their kind of specialist nurse or their consultant, but also have treatments like acupuncture, massage, see their physio or an OT, or a therapist like myself, and other arts therapists as well. And so through this work, I became really, really interested in how interlinked our physical and mental health are, which I know much more is now in the public eye, and people are understanding that much more, and how dramatherapy specifically could be a really valuable way of supporting people to live with these chronic and life-limiting conditions.
And you mentioned there about the kind of the links between working with both the mind and the body, which leads me on to a question about how dramatherapy can help with mental health.
Yeah, so I think it can help in lots and lots of different ways. I mean, at its most kind of basic, it is such a valuable space to just come and share and process difficult emotions that we all feel at different times, but particularly when you're living with something, a condition like MS, there's going to be a lot of emotion that comes up, either if you're at the beginning stages of your journey when you've just received diagnosis, or in the kind of midway through. There's constantly things that are coming up, frustrations, new things. Your MS is changing. There's lots that kind of, I think, benefits from just having a space where you can come and really kind of just allow those feelings to be, because sometimes we just don't have time in the rest of our lives. We're all busy, and it's quite difficult sometimes. So those emotions can kind of get a bit stuck and a bit trapped. And I just think the support kind of from a trusted and trained professional who's separate from your everyday life is really, really valuable, because I'm sure all of us feel this, that sometimes the person that is closest to us is actually sometimes the most difficult to talk to, when it's really kind of, you're in the thick of it, and it's every day. So just having that space, that somebody else that you can go and be with, who's outside of your normal life, you don't see them other than for that time, that session you have with them a week, is really, really important. I think it's also a place that we can really strengthen and build resilience. So discovering your own inner resources. As I mentioned earlier, dramatherapy is very much a kind of person-centered therapy. So it's not that we as the therapist have the answers. So we're working with the client, working with the individual to kind of help them almost, not solve their own problems, but find their own way through. So it's their own journey, and we will support them in that. But we ultimately believe that each individual is able to, through their own inner resources, with some support and help, kind of live the life and cope the way that they want to be, and live the way they want to be. So I think that's really important. And then finally, I think dramatherapy is really playful. It can be lots of fun, particularly kind of if you're in a group, and it's a great chance to try something different. It can be quite relaxing, and you might even surprise yourself. So I always think that's good for one's mental health, to do something that's surprising and fun and a bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the tools sort of specific to dramatherapy that would be helpful with MS that they might not find in other therapies, that they've tried?
Absolutely. So, I mean, in many ways, obviously, I think any therapy can be a helpful space to explore what you might be feeling in relation to your MS. But I think specifically what I found in my work with dramatherapy is that it lends itself very well to working with role and the idea of roles. So I'm sure many listeners will have the experience of a role that they previously fulfilled. It might be a job that you did that you loved, or it might be the role that you have within your family, or even society kind of at large. You might find that those roles are changing, and it might be that you're no longer able to do the job that you loved anymore, or you might have to kind of take it down to part-time hours. Or so there's this feeling of like shifting roles, and the things that I used to do and the roles that I used to fulfill are changing and may no longer be available to me in the same way. And I think that's very significant because we kind of get a lot of our sense of purpose and our sense of self from the roles that we play, and the interactions that we have with others in those roles. And it can sometimes be very, very difficult. It's a process of loss, I think, a process of grief, really, when an illness that we're living with, and that can cause a lot of sadness, depression, and anger, frustration, lots of emotions around that. So I think drama therapy is really, really specifically useful, because it's making use of roles all the time. So whether that be through a story or a character, or exploring the roles that we play in our daily lives, it's kind of inherently there within our sort of dramatic frame that we bring to the therapy. And so I think it's a really helpful way of people both acknowledging, I think, the loss of those roles, which is really important to do, but also trying out, experimenting different roles that might be available to us now. So kind of lessening that feeling of, oh, well, because I can't do what I did before, that's just it. But actually, there are lots of other possibilities. And I within this kind of safety of the therapy space, can try those out and sort of experiment with them a bit, which I think is hugely empowering for people. Another kind of key area, I think, is, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the idea of working with the body. And I know that with kind of MS and other long-term conditions, sort of the way our body functions is obviously hugely impacted. And that probably then in line with that is the way we feel about our body. So we can feel probably quite angry towards it sometimes, quite sort of rejecting of it, the fact that it's not doing what we want it to do and it did before. So drama therapy is really helpful. Again, it uses techniques that help us reconnect with our bodies, express the feelings that we have that may surround the illness and our changing health, and it can kind of tap into using creative movement, so finding different ways of moving that might be expressive rather than functional movement, which can really release things and expand kind of how we might kind of move in the world and feel about our body in relation to our illness. So I think that's really helpful, and it's a very creative therapy as well. So I just believe in the power of creativity and how positive that can be for one's well-being, one's mental health. As I said before, kind of tapping into our own natural inner resources, but because we're coming at it creatively, often it's things that we didn't even know we had in us. And I think it can be a really amazing way of coping with change.
And I think that's really interesting, especially about changing roles. I know that's something that we hear a lot from people with MS, that kind of grief they feel. They've kind of almost lost their purpose, if they can't do the things that they love because of their MS, who are they? And trying to find kind of a new path as such. So that's really interesting, I think, in MS as a condition. And I know you've worked with people living with MS within your drama therapy work. Are there any sort of examples that you could discuss on the podcast about how this particular type of therapy has helped that individual?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that springs to mind, so I worked with a client who I will call Cynthia. She's given me consent to discuss her work on the podcast, but I will change her name and maintain confidentiality. So Cynthia and I worked together for about 9 months, I think. I specifically kind of wanted to talk about her because I think it gives a really useful example. Sometimes talking about drama therapy and what it is quite intangible. So I think, having a kind of a specific example of how she made use of her own drama therapy process is maybe useful to listeners. So she'd been living, when I met her, she'd been living with her MS for 20 years, and had kind of had an initial period where she was, I think her consultant said, go away and forget about it for a while, and she did. And she was able to live with it, and the symptoms did progress, but it was quite gradual. And she was very busy as a mother and as a wife, and also had a job that she loved, and was sort of in our first meeting described herself very much as this kind of whirlwind, sort of Wonder Woman. She would just be able to do it all. So she was constantly on the go, constantly in the centre of like family life, and you know, her job as well was very busy and involved a lot of people. So very much on the go. And then her MS progressed to the point by the time I met her where actually she had to retire from her job due to her health, and she was full-time in an electric wheelchair. So she was feeling very much at a point, as we spoke about earlier, where that loss of that really important role to her was impacting her a lot. That kind of feeling of purpose and that sense of self that had really given her was no longer there. And feelings of kind of grief about that, and that the fact that, you know, she'd not really been able to kind of mourn that loss. And then, a lot of frustration and anger at where she was at with her MS and what she felt it was stopping her from doing. But that was very much held alongside a desire from her to be able to accept help more readily, to sort of be able to be a bit more able to adapt and sort of integrate the MS into her life. She was kind of at this crossroads, I feel, of like frustration and anger and needing to grieve, but also really wanting and desiring to be able to move forward. So we had various strands to our work, but the one that kind of really stands out and was a really, I think, beautiful example of you know, drama therapy at work, which completely came from her, actually. So quite often the drama therapist working with somebody might suggest a story that we know, or tell a story and see if the client kind of responds to that. But in this instance, it was something that came entirely from Cynthia herself, which was we'd kind of started one session and we'd been working together for a while, and something kind of came up in the session, and she was reminded of the story of Coppelia, which is a ballet. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it or familiar with it.
Yes, I've seen it actually. Saw it last year. Before COVID times.
Oh, amazing. So a beautiful ballet called Coppelia, which she had loved as a child, absolutely loved. And so for those who kind of may not be familiar, sort of very simply, really, it's the story of Coppelia, who kind of appears to be a girl, but on closer inspection, you sort of discover that she's actually a life-size mechanical doll, and she lives in the workshop of is he a kind of a mad professor, or I'm not quite sure of the character.
An inventor of sorts.
An inventor, yeah. So she lives in this workshop, and she sits overlooking the town square on this balcony every day, but just motionless. And there's a young man in the village, and I think in Cynthia's telling of the story, he was actually a prince, but he sees her and he falls in love with her because she looks so beautiful, not realizing that she's a doll. It becomes a little bit more complicated because there's another female character who's in there, anyway, in the sort of the remembered version that Cynthia had, there was a beautiful moment where the prince is able to get into the workshop, and he and Coppelia dance together. So that was her kind of remembered version. So that again is the client-led part. It wasn't that I went away and researched the story. We went with what she could remember and what was important to her about the story that she could remember. So I was really intrigued by that this story had emerged, and we spoke about it quite a lot, and you know, she was fascinated by it as well, and it brought up lots of memories. And then we started to work with to begin with the character of Coppelia, because Cynthia was in her wheelchair, quite often she would instruct me to sort of set up the room or do things that she wasn't able to access. So we worked together, and we sort of built the workshop. So I have scarves and other props and materials I might use in the session. So we kind of constructed this workshop, and then she became the character of Coppelia, sort of sitting in this balcony, kind of like gazing out at this world that was out there, that she wasn't able to access, and it became this really beautiful, poignant metaphor for how Cynthia was feeling at the time, about her MS, how it made her feel very trapped, how she felt like the rest of the world was kind of carrying on, but she was stuck. And the kind of character of Coppelia, I think there's a giant key that can come along and wind, but it's very much up to the discretion of the inventor. She can't control the key, so she's sort of waiting to be unlocked, waiting help, waiting for assistance, and it was just this really, really rich story that we were able to work with in so many different ways that allowed Cynthia to really express the loss and the frustration, held very safely within this character of Coppelia. And she was, of course, able to make links to her own life, but there were things I think she was able to voice and say through playing this character that perhaps she wouldn't have been able to as herself. The process went on, and she was able to explore. So the other character that is kind of in this little trio is the character Swanhilda. You probably remember the story better than I, having seen it last year. But Swanhilda, I believe, is in love with the prince, or the hero of the story. Is that right? Yeah. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So she also loves him.
Love triangle going on.
A bit of a love triangle going on. And so Cynthia was also able to use that character to explore different sides and emotions, and it's almost like they became two sides of the same kind of character. So one very trapped and stuck, and the other one free but not able to access the love that she wanted. So it was a really interesting way that she used her memory of the story to kind of explore these different issues. I hope that's a kind of indication of just the richness and possibilities that are there with drama therapy that can come from working with a story, with metaphor.
And if people want to find out more about drama therapy and how it can help with MS, where's the best place for them to go?
So probably the kind of first port of call, we have a professional body which is called the British Association of Dramatherapists, and on their website there is a button where it's kind of find a drama therapist little link, and you can actually then look at all the drama therapists that are on the association list, and actually view it by location as well. So you may be able to see, because I'm aware that listeners might be all over the country, so you'll be able to see quite quickly, is a drama therapist in my area? Who do they work with? That kind of thing. So you could do your own searching, which is one possibility. So that that website is badth, which is badth.org.uk. So that might be a good starting point just to find out if there's anyone in your area. And then I think it's worth probably having a chat with if you've got an MS nurse or a consultant, or the team that you work with and that you see for your kind of regular appointments. Just mention to them, I'm really interested in getting some more sort of therapeutic support. Do you know of any drama therapists or arts therapists that are kind of working in the area or across the service? And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, you will find us in all sorts of places. We'll often pop up, and it will be surprising, but it might just be that no one's ever asked them that question before, and then they go, actually we've got one here in the hospital, or it's possible that there's one around. And then, as I was talking about earlier, I mean, the way that I was working was actually within a hospice, and so it may well be that there's a hospice local to you that actually has part of its remit supporting people who are living with conditions, with chronic conditions. So I think that's a really worthwhile sort of place to sort of check in, see what services they've got available. Even if it's not drama therapy, it might be that you can access something like massage or Reiki or acupuncture. So I think it's really worth checking out what other services are available there that might kind of meet some of your needs. Because I'm aware sometimes that you can kind of go between appointments with not much else necessarily that's sort of supporting you in living with MS, and it might only be at those times of crisis that you're able to see someone or access services, and actually there are things out there that mean that you can have more regular support, which I think can sometimes be really helpful.
Now, if this was a commercial podcast, here is where there would be some advert. But we're a charity, so we don't do that. But we would like to take this opportunity to tell you about our website, which is filled with information about MS and mental health. There is a fantastic A to Z that will cover topics such as depression, mood swings, anxiety, and lots of other useful things. Go and have a browse yourself at www.mstrust.org.uk.
Right, we are back. A big thank you to Sara. I'm going to be honest, I really didn't know much about drama therapy before that interview, so I found that really interesting. I think hearing more about this approach and how it can help people process difficult feelings and emotions, particularly when it comes to shifting roles and dealing with the grief a diagnosis can bring, it really struck me how useful it could be for people dealing with the emotional challenges around MS. Do you think this is an approach that you would try, Helena?
I thought it was really interesting and something that I hadn't thought of like this, but in some ways I tried something similar. So I recently was training to run a marathon, and I was really worried about the fact that would MS get in the way? Would I be able to actually train? Would I be able to do this? And my coach, she lent me this book called The Alter Ego Effect, which was kind of about creating a different persona that's you, but a little bit more or a little bit better, and who wouldn't have those kind of problems or issues. So she was saying, this could be with sport or things like that, but it could also be like if you're really worried about standing up in front of an audience and doing a speech. That so the guy who wrote the book, he said he would put on his glasses and then he would become a different guy altogether who is much smarter and much more confident and sort of deliver these things. So I can sort of see how playing a role would make you look at yourself from the outside and maybe deal with things in a different way. Because, you always say like people are very unkind to themselves, but you wouldn't say those things to a friend. So if I'm sitting here saying, oh, you're rubbish, Helena, you can't do this, you can't do that. But I wouldn't say that to you if you were, feeling down.
Yeah.
It's almost doing the same thing, but looking at yourself from a different angle.
Different perspective, definitely. And what role did you decide, Helena? So we had, was it a Clark Kent style superhero when you were doing your marathon?
Well, it was funny because so my dad, he was in the army, so I sort of almost tried to get myself into some sort of military way of thinking, of looking at it like kind of going out and just getting it done and trying not to focus on the pain and stuff and just be a bit more kind of assertive and a little bit less aloof and silly.
Love it. Well, I'll be watching my back next time I'm with you, that you don't go into army mode. Next on the podcast is Jessie Ace. Jessie is a podcaster, illustrator, author, and pretty much an all-round inspiring lady. She was diagnosed with MS 7 years ago and is really passionate about raising awareness of the condition, helping others, and generally just spreading positive vibes. She's all too aware of the emotional challenges that MS can bring. And when I spoke to her a few weeks ago, she really opened up about the impact MS has had on her own mental health. And just a trigger warning here, this interview does contain talk of suicide. So if you're affected by any of the issues discussed in this podcast, please know that the Samaritans and lots of other organisations are there to help. You can call the Samaritans on 116 123. Let's welcome Jessie to the podcast. Hi Jessie, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today to talk MS and mental health, a topic we know that you're really passionate about. So let's start at the beginning. When you were diagnosed with MS, what kind of feelings did you experience when you heard those words? And how did you deal with that diagnosis?
Yeah, well, not very well, if I'm honest, right at the start, because for me it all happened in such a whirlwind. So for most people with MS, like it might take 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. For me, it happened in 3 days. From being perfectly able and healthy to being disabled and having this diagnosis within 3 days. And it completely just wiped me out. Emotionally, to be honest. At the time, I was 22 years old. It was the last day of university, and I'd woken up with my left side just not working whatsoever. And I was like, this is really weird. But I kind of put it down to the fact that I was like, well, I've worked really hard the last few weeks to get all my work done for my degree. I was like, I'm probably just exhausted. I've probably just overdone it. It'll be fine. In true dress fashion, it'll be fine. And obviously it wasn't. So it was about 7 days later when my boyfriend at the time, he's now my husband, my boyfriend at the time was like, okay, I think we really need to go and get you checked out because this is not normal. You shouldn't still have this like a left side that's not working after a week. Like something's not quite right here, Jess. And I was like, oh, this is fine. It'll be fine. I think, to be honest, I was just in complete denial. And I was like, no, I don't want anything to be wrong. Everything's fine. So anyway, I went to the doctors and she said it was something called a hemiplegic migraine. And I'd never had a migraine before. So it was really weird. I was like, okay, is this what a migraine does? Like, I don't understand. I didn't have a headache or anything. So it was very strange. But at the same time, I was kind of like, ha, told you it was nothing, to my boyfriend kind of thing. And she was like, yeah, it'll go in a few weeks' time. I was like, fine. So it was about an hour after that when she actually rang me back, and she was like, do you know what, actually, I just spoke to my colleague. You could have actually had a stroke. You should really go to A&E and get this checked out properly. So I was like, okay, that's a bit more severe. So then I started to really freak out in my own mind. And I was like, okay, fine. But I kind of reasoned with myself, and I was kind of like, do you know what? If it's a stroke, then it's already happened. So there's nothing really to worry about, right? The thing that I worried about was actually going into A&E, because I'd never actually been in a hospital before other than to visit someone. So that was a completely new experience, and it was very, very scary at the time. And I actually got admitted and stayed in hospital for about 3 days, which was interesting. And I didn't really want to give away to anyone else outside of the hospital that like I was totally freaking out in my own mind. So when like my mum was messaging me and things like that, I was like, oh no, it's fine. It's kind of like a really weird spa, yeah, because people bring around tea and cake every so often, and it's nice, and like people wheel me around in wheelchairs everywhere, and it's like I don't even have to walk. It's really awesome. You know, like it's just kind of covering up the fact that I was totally freaking out underneath it all. So yeah, but I remember exactly how I felt when I got the MS diagnosis. It was my neurologist guy came over through the ward, because I was on a stroke ward full of 80-year-old ladies, which were very nice, but they were like shouting and screaming all day and night long. So it was very scary. But he came over and he drew the curtain around my bed, and he sat on the end of my bed, and he looked me square in the eyes, and he was just like, Jessie, yeah, so we want to do one more test to confirm this, but we think it's something called multiple sclerosis. I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, do you know what that is? I said, nope. Haven't got a clue. What the heck is that? Never heard of it. Don't know anybody with it. What on earth is that? Yeah. But all that flashed in my mind at the time was wheelchairs, and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. This is it. It's like, oh. So yeah, it was a very sort of mixed sort of thing, and I know for a lot of people, diagnosis comes almost what's the word? Almost as a relief for people, because you've been feeling symptoms for so long, and maybe you just wanted that, like the words, the label to kind of go, that's what that was. Yeah. That makes me feel better now. But for me, I'd had nothing leading up to that I was kind of aware of. So I was like, this is weird and scary and weird. Yeah. So he then said the most pivotal words of my whole diagnosis story, which was, the best thing for you to do right now is to go home and Google it to find out what it is for yourself. What? You do not tell people that. What the heck? Oh, but at the time, you know, I thought it was normal and I thought it was fine. I was like, fine, okay, whatever. I just wanted him to go away. So I was like, yeah, okay, sure, well, I'll just do that. It's fine. Oh my goodness. And then he brought in the guys to do a lumbar puncture. I just didn't know what that was at the time. I was just like, oh, okay, lie down. Okay, fine, whatever. Which was also very funny. But yeah, so from that point then, I didn't have any sort of contact with an MS nurse or a neurologist or anybody for about 4 or 5 months afterwards. So in that 4 or 5 months, when I did not know a single thing about MS, and I was reading online, and I was, you know, I didn't understand that it was so different for each person. I thought it was like the cold, you know, when you get a cold, you get sniffles, you get a sneeze. I just thought it was like that. So when I was in MS groups and I was reading things like people waking up and they were blind, and people who lost the use of their legs or something, all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, this is going to happen to me. What? Are you kidding me? This is crazy. So I got very, very depressed, and I felt so angry, and I felt so confused at the same time. There was just so many emotions going on in my head at that point. And I think it definitely wasn't helped by the fact that I had no information whatsoever. You know, like he did say to me, if you got any questions and things, and I was like, I have 1,000, but like nothing would come out. You know, I was like, I was so desperately trying to hold on to the tears that just wanted to fall from my face. And I was like, no, they've got to stay in there. They've got to stay in there. I've got to look strong to everybody else. Oh my goodness me. It was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind kind of couple of days. But leaving the hospital and just you know, feeling all of these weird symptoms going on in your body, like it never happened before. And it was super weird not having a left side that worked either. And a few weeks after leaving hospital, I actually lost the use of my right hand as well. Like the strength just went. I don't even know how to explain it, but like it kind of just clawed up like this. And that's all I could kind of do. It was just make a fist, and I couldn't use my hands. And I was like, oh my God. So I've just studied for 3 years to finish an art degree, and I set up a business as an illustrator in my second year. And now all of a sudden I can't hold a pencil. So on top of everything else, I'd also felt like I just lost my purpose in life completely, because that's all that I knew how to do at the time, you know? And I was like, I'm 22 years old, I can't draw. So I like these huge future plans that I'd made of being like the most, being like a celebrity designer and things like that, like all of a sudden gone, just overnight, all of a sudden. I cannot, it was just such an overwhelming time back then. I just got so depressed. I was like, every day just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And I was just having all these weird pains for the first time. I was having weakness for the first time. I just felt completely exhausted. And I was having what I now know to be the pain of optic neuritis in the back of my eye, which was absolutely horrible. And I did not know what was going on. I thought it was the blind thing that I'd read about in Facebook groups. So I was totally freaking out. And it got to a point where I was just so low and I just felt like I had nothing left to give to the world, you know? And I remember being in the middle of the city centre that I lived in, and I was at some traffic lights waiting for them to change, and the road was just so busy. There's like 4 lanes of traffic in front of me. And I just felt so angry and so confused and so hurt and just so like did not know what was going on. I just felt, you know what? It would be so easy right now to just fall into that traffic and just then it would all end. Then it would all stop. And which is a very scary thought to have at 22 years old.
Yeah.
That was definitely not good. And at that time, you know, I just left university, so I didn't have a job to go into, because the idea was I would make my own job with my business that I set up in the second year. And by the end of university, I'd actually had like an agent that wanted to represent me at worldwide trade shows. I had a book deal in the works. I had my illustrations stocked in stores like up and down the country. Like all of these things were happening.
Yeah.
But as soon as I lost the use of my hands, I was like, well, it's all gone. It's all over now. Because I no longer had confidence in my own body to be able to do anything, to fulfill anything. And it was such a scary time. Because I just felt like everything had been taken away so much. And so I got a job in fashion. But somehow, I don't know how, because I'm not really interested in fashion. But I got this job in fashion, and all I needed to do as a designer in fashion was move a stylus pen around a graphics tab. So as long as I hold that pen somehow in my hand, it wasn't dependent on like putting pressure on, or, you know, like the muscles that you use when you write. Wasn't dependent on that. So nobody actually knew for like 3 years that I had MS and I couldn't feel my hat. Because I didn't tell anyone about it to start off with, because I didn't want that pity, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself, because I had no confidence at that time whatsoever. So it all just felt such hard work. It really, really did.
And I think we know that many people living with MS experience mental health problems. Not only as a consequence of living with the condition, but also as a direct symptom of MS, you know, like pain or fatigue. And what is this something that you relate to? What impact do you feel that MS has had on your mental health?
Yeah, well, like you say, I mean, like when you're in pain suddenly all the time and you're fatigued all the time, and it stops you from doing what you want to do, then it makes you feel so angry and so frustrated. And just like, I feel like sometimes I kind of take it out on my body a little bit more than I should. And it's especially hard when you're one of those people that like to be productive, you like to be busy, you know, you like to always be doing something. It is hard when you suddenly have that limitation, and you just have this realization that I can't do that anymore. I can't keep going like this. It's just ridiculous, to be honest, sometimes. So, and I found that really hard to deal with, and it is something that I still find hard to deal with, to be honest, because this is an ongoing thing. It's not like, and it's so up in the air all the time. Like one day I can do exactly the same thing as I did the day before, but then sometimes like I do the same thing, and sometimes the day after I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, my brain is just so foggy, or I'm just so exhausted, or I'm just like, yeah, I can't even explain it. It's something in you that just kind of goes, nope, not today. And it's like that. It's just having that. What's the word? Having that kind of understanding and kind of reasoning with yourself to just kind of go, okay, do you know what? Well, we maybe, that might be a struggle today. Let's see what else we can do. We can do something else that's productive. And this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm working on every day right now. So it's like, maybe I can't write an article today, or maybe I can't draw that today. Okay, well, what can I do today? Okay, well, I can listen to a podcast that's going to help me to learn more about marketing, so I can like sell more illustrations in the future or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that instead. It's swapping. I think for a lot of people, as soon as you wake up and you kind of go, yeah, do you know what? Today's not a good day. For a lot of people, they just write that off and they just go, okay, well, I'm just going to sit and watch TV all day.
Yeah.
And that's great for like, a few hours.
Yeah.
If it's a really bad day, then sure, take the day off, do whatever you need to do. But I think when you flip that on its head, and because that alone will affect your mental health, because you'll feel like you won't have accomplished anything. I don't anyway. This is just my personal experience. When I've sat and watched TV for a few hours, I'm like, right, I feel like I've not achieved anything. And now I feel really bad. So, which is why I've kind of started to listen to more audiobooks and more podcasts and things like that. So at least I'm learning something whilst my body is not moving.
Yeah. And I think that's something we've heard from a lot of people with MS, actually. People who have been on the podcast have spoken about that often they find themselves, they're beating themselves up because they can't do, their body isn't allowing them to do what they want it to do. And that can be really hard to kind of get your head around. And I think what you've said there is really helpful, because I think sometimes you just have to take a step back and be like, okay, well, today I can't do this, but I can do this instead, and just not kind of have this constant pressure on yourself to do this stuff all the time, which can be, as you said, quite a hard process and a journey to go through. And what has helped you deal with some of these issues that you mentioned? Do you have any kind of top tips that's helped when you're having days like you said there, or kind of having a day where you're just feeling like particularly low? What have you found useful?
I think for me, I've found the thing that I've found the most helpful when bad days happen is actually it starts on the good days. So it starts on the days where you plan for the bad days. That's been a huge thing for me. So, getting food in that is easier to make, and things like that, or like batch cooking and putting that in the freezer, just having something set aside so that you're prepared for a bad day. And then when you have a bad day, you're like, oh no, now I've got to cook something. Oh no, I don't, because I'm pre-made it and it's in the freezer and I can just bang it in the oven, and it's so much easier. So things like that. So being prepared is a big thing for me. And I think, managing your energy is another big thing. So, when I'm planning out my week at the start of the week, if I've got like a really big, heavy day one day, I'll make sure to have a really light day the next day, and things like that. So you're always kind of being kind to yourself, having that kind of awareness of kind of going, right, okay, I know that I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, Z every single day this week. That's fine. I'm okay with that. I've made peace with that now. So I'm going to make sure that I do this and this and this. And like I was saying sometime before, so the things that I make sure to do every day as well is set my 3 top priorities. So these are the 3 biggest things that I can do each day, either in my personal life, in my business, or whatever. As long as I get those 3 things done, then I don't have to do anything for the rest of the day. So if you've woken up and maybe you're having like a really tired sort of day where you just feel like so heavy and you feel so just like sluggish and lethargic, and you're just like, oh, I don't want to do anything today. It's just, ugh. It's having those, I think having those more positive things that you can kind of do for yourself in the day. Like we mentioned before, like, you know, if you feel like you want to just sit and watch TV, do it for an hour or two, and then say to yourself, well, do you know what, now I'm going to go and listen to a podcast. You don't have to do anything different, really. You just have to pull out your phone and go, right, okay, I'm just going to find a podcast that's going to inspire me, that's going to make me feel good, and I'm just going to do that, you know, and treat it more like a self-care day. So when I'm having a bad day, I quite often like run a bath and just spend an hour and a half in the bath and just fall asleep and just go, do you know what, I'm just going to relax. Like, this is my body's way of telling me that I need to slow down and just kind of take note of what I've been doing, and just kind of look after yourself, I think. So it's doing those sorts of things.
And what do you think is the importance of raising awareness of MS and mental health? I think we're all quite good now at recognising those physical symptoms, but sometimes we could be less good at talking about and normalising the conversation around some of the mental symptoms associated with MS.
Yeah, it's so true. And so often, like, it's almost like the mental health doesn't count. That's the feeling that I get. And it's hard to open yourself up to someone else and feel vulnerable about saying, you know, I don't feel good today, or like I feel lost, or I feel confused, or I feel really sad. And it's good to say those things to someone else. The hardest part is getting them to listen. It's the hardest part. But I think, we do need a lot more focus on mental health as a whole, and not only recognising the symptoms of mental health, but like, actually, how do we deal with that? You know, what is the best way to, what are the best actions that we can take if we are feeling sad, or if we are feeling like we've lost our purpose, for example?
Yeah.
And there are so many things that you can do, and that nobody talks about, and it's so annoying.
Yeah.
So one of the best things that I found to really keep track of my mental health and keep on top of it and keep in a positive mindset every single day is the morning routine that I do. And I've not heard about this spoken about in on any sort of platform and anywhere. It's crazy. And the morning routine that I do focuses on gratefulness, and it focuses on journaling, and it focuses on the positive intentions. So, you know, quite often when we have pain and we have fatigue and things like that, we'll wake up and we'll go, oh, I am in so much pain today, or I'm so tired, I can't do this, and things like that. And the actual language that we use is so important, and we don't even realise it, and we don't get taught about this stuff either. And we need to be. So the things. So we were talking before about the Enabled Warrior Symptom Tracker that I made, and the daily sheets that we have in that tracker that we created is a kind of daily mindfulness, almost sort of thing to fill in, because that's all the things that I do every day that has really helped me, and I mean really helped me. So going from that kind of overwhelmed, angry, confused kind of state that I was in when I was newly diagnosed, as soon as I found this morning routine and I started saying things to myself like, do you know what, I am strong, I am energetic today, even if I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it to start off with, but that's not the point. The point is, the more that you tell yourself that, the more it kind of gets into your head, and the better that you feel. It's amazing. So you'd say things as well to yourself like, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am enough, you know, like things like that. Because we so often tell ourselves that we're not good enough, and we so often tell, I'm so ugly, you know, like I'm so fat, you know, things like that. And that is just not helpful to you. It's really not. So whether you believe it or not, tell yourself that you are beautiful. Look in that mirror and just, you know, and have that sort of awareness of your body and what your body has done for you. Because as soon as you kind of start to look internally, and you kind of go, oh wow, like my body is pumping blood all around my body right now, and I didn't even realize that. I forgot about that.
That's so true. It's something you don't even think about, that our bodies are amazing things.
They really are. And like, I'm breathing, and air is going in and out of my body. It's being exchanged. I don't even have to think about that. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's just a phenomenal thing. And we really need to be more grateful of our bodies and just have that reminder every single day of, wow, like I'm an amazing human being because my body is phenomenal. It might not, yes, fair enough, it might not do what I want it to do quite a lot of the time. But you know what I can do right now, and think about the things that you can do rather than what you can't do. What you can do right now is amazing. You have that power within you to do absolutely anything that you want to in your life.
I think that's a really important message for our listeners to hear. So thank you for sharing that, Jessie. And for anyone who is listening at the moment, who has been recently diagnosed and is struggling with their mental health, or perhaps is slightly further along in their MS journey, what would you say to them?
For people who are newly diagnosed, I'd say you're most likely going to be feeling a lot of things right now. You have all the emotions going on right now, guys. I mean, you're probably feeling angry, you're probably feeling frustrated and sad and confused, and just, you probably feel like you're almost kind of grieving the person that you once were. And that's totally okay. Those emotions are valid, they are yours, they are totally fine. And these people that there's a lot of people online that kind of go, oh, well, you were diagnosed yesterday, you should be all right with it now, you should move on. No, that's not realistic. That is not realistic. It took me 4 years to get to a place where I was even comfortable talking about my MS journey. That is a completely fine thing. It's totally fine, totally valid. So whatever you're feeling right now, just lean into that, lean into those feelings and just get that out there. Whatever you need to do, just do it. And then after you've kind of gone through that process, that's when you can go and find your community. That's when you can kind of move on from it a little bit and you can kind of go, right, okay, what can I adapt to me right now so that I can still do the things that I want to do, but maybe my body won't let me do as I previously did. Which is fair enough. Yeah. And if you've been diagnosed for a while, you've kind of got to a stage where you're almost kind of comfortable with the feelings that you have every day, the symptoms that you have every day. Maybe comfortable is not the right word, but you're used to them. You're used to feeling those things. And that is also totally fine. And what I would say to you is to kind of focus on those top 3 priorities every day and do the things that we were saying about the mindset stuff. If you whether you're newly diagnosed or if you're further along in your journey, both of them, the daily things, just give those a go. Start writing what you're grateful for every morning. Start writing down the thoughts in your head every day. Start doing the I am statements, because they will make such a huge difference to you.
Thank you so much to Jessie for talking so openly and honestly there. It really resonated with me when she spoke about the unpredictability of MS and the frustration and the anger that brings. And I think sometimes all of us MSers can be guilty of being too hard on ourselves when our body can't do all the things that you want it to do. And it's so important to be kind to yourself and not compare yourself to others, what other people can do. I think one friend of mine with MS said you can only sort of do your own battles, and it's MS is such a snowflake disease condition, so you can't really just expect that someone's journey will be similar to yours.
Definitely. And I really like Jessie's tips around self-care too, and going back to that message of being kind to ourselves. I think that morning routine she spoke about, focusing on positive intentions that you want to achieve throughout the day, gratefulness and journaling. I think that's something we could all take inspiration from when it comes to looking after our mental well-being.
And I really think it's one of those things I keep on reading about, and I think this sounds so good, but I don't know if it would be for me. But then I just think I should just do it, and try it, because sometimes you do get surprised over these things that how easy it can be to just make yourself feel a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you for all our guests who have appeared on the podcast today. We really appreciate you giving your time to chat to us and share your stories and your tips and advice. Remember that if you have any questions about MS, we are here for you. Our inquiry service is available from Monday to Friday, except UK bank holidays, from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. You can email the team at ask@mstrust.org.uk or call 0800 032 3839.
And you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. Get in touch and, like they say, like and subscribe.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.